The other three major sectors are all based on natural resources, and you can't grow infinitely based on them. So you have to generate more value out of what you get. And so we've had some really exciting, innovative companies coming out of these sort of basic sectors.
This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only and is not investment, legal, or financial advice. Opinions are those of the host and guests and do not reflect any affiliated entities. Investing involves risk, and past performance is not indicative of future results. The host and guests may hold positions in discussed securities. Before we jump in, a quick plug. I write weekly in the Global Capital Insider newsletter. I cover foreign direct investment, global trade, and infrastructure projects. My twist? I keep it light, fun, and concise. Think global power plays, billion-dollar projects, and behind-the-scenes deal-making, all in plain English. If that sounds like your thing, check the URL in the description below and subscribe. Now back to the show. Arnar, thank you so much for joining me. All right, Arnar, you were the head of Invest in Iceland at Business Iceland. Business Iceland is a public-private partnership promoting Icelandic export, foreign direct investment, and Iceland as a destination. So, Arnar, I was looking up some stats. Iceland is incredible. I mean, it's a super small country. You guys punch way above your weight, and these stats are incredible. So I just want to read off a quick few. GDP per capita, $85,000, which is crazy. GDP per capita world ranking, you're number 7 in the entire world. 85% of your energy is produced by renewables. Your population, you guys have less than 400,000 people. It's like 390K, something like that. And this is the fun fact. Icelandic athletes have won the World's Strongest Man competition a total of 8 times. That ranks you 3rd globally behind the US and the UK. All right, so most important question here. What's in your water? Why are you guys so strong? What is this?
I'm not sure this would apply to every Icelander. You have to select a few to compete in this. But actually, some people claim that the long life Icelanders enjoy is actually based on the geothermal resources we have, because the outdoor swimming pools are really the place where Icelanders go to meet and relax or work out. So if you want to get to know the Icelandic society, you jump in the hot tubs at the public swimming pools early morning, and then you get all the gossip and all the basic information that you need.
Very cool. Have there been studies done that show that the hot springs or kind of that process makes you healthier? Or is it just like the act of swimming and, getting outside? Is that just healthy in general?
I think it's swimming in general, but also there has been some studying that's mainly been done on sauna that actually show the benefit of alternative hot and cold. And that's when you go in the winter to an outdoor swimming pool. You have to leave the dressing rooms, you have to go to the swimming pool, then you exercise, then you go to the hot tubs, etc. So you're alternating this hot and cold all the time.
Very cool. All right, so what do you personally attribute these Icelandic stellar fiscal stats to? Because I mentioned 85,000 per capita GDP and number 7 in the world rankings. Like, that's really incredible for a small island nation. Is it attributable to just really good governance? Is it because you guys have a ton of energy? Like, why are you guys in this position?
It's a combination of many factors. Actually, Iceland was for a long time a really poor country. But then the development started when we actually started investing in, for example, the fishing industries, utilizing our natural resources. That was basically the first major industry in Iceland was the fisheries, and that was by far our largest export industry for a long while. We got some foreign direct investment into the country as well. We started getting energy-intensive industries, large-scale aluminium smelters, etc. That broadened the export base. And you said Iceland is a small country. We geographically, we are larger than Ireland. We are about the size of Wisconsin, I'm told, with only 390,000. So that means there are a lot of resources to go around for a fairly small population if they are utilized in a sustainable way. So then actually tourism started taking off quite well. Iceland was discovered as a destination. So that really took off. And then most recently, we've seen the fastest growth in our knowledge-based industries, tech and innovation. And that's very, very really focusing because the other three major sectors are all based on natural resources, and you can't grow infinitely based on them. So you have to generate more value out of what you get. And so we've had some really exciting, innovative companies coming out of these sort of basic sectors that are built on them and actually create great value. For example, used only to sell the fillet of the cuts. Now we have companies that are producing really valuable second skin products from fish skin, and they're using all kinds of enzymes from the cod. We have a project actually that was called 100% cod, which meant waste nothing, generate value from everything. And that's the way we are going. Also with the geothermal resources, there is huge emphasis now on cascading uses of geothermal. So not just for space heating or not just for electricity generation. It's been used for land-based fish farming, etc. Obviously for health and wellness, like the swimming pools I mentioned earlier. So things are progressing in this way. We are also one of the Nordic countries, the 5 Nordic countries. So we are part of that family. We share the values with the Nordic countries. There are many things, I think, actually behind these figures. Education is one of them, universal literacy. So few contributing factors, very much.
So you mentioned that Iceland was a poor nation previously. What was the primary economic activity back then? Was it primarily just fishing, and then did agriculture?
Agriculture. Icelanders were exporters of wool, for example, in medieval times, and then salted cod. The Icelandic bacalao was sold to, for example, to Spain and Portugal, etc. But it was a rural agricultural society for a long time.
In your opinion, is foreign direct investment responsible for kind of making Iceland a stellar economy today?
Partly because when we got foreign direct investment into the country, for example, to build up the fishing fleet, there were some international financing that came in, for example, to buy Icelanders the newer trawlers, etc., for doing the fisheries. Also, there was foreign direct investment involved when Iceland started industrialization. So I think it contributes, definitely. There is actually there's a really interesting paper that was written on this by now our director of the central bank, actually tracing the impact of foreign direct investment. Because being an island nation, a fairly small nation, open trade and communication with the world around us is all important.
What do you attribute being the kind of the primary driver of the early of Iceland's growth from going from a poor nation to a wealthy nation? Was it the fisheries, or was it the aluminum smelting? What was that like inflection point?
It comes like I would say it comes with the fisheries. The early 1904, we started installing machinery and motors into fishing boats, leaving behind sailboats and rowing boats to go further, be able to fish more. Then there came more like industrialization in the fishing industries. So that was a really, really important stepping stone. A little bit later, we started getting our independence, establishing University of Iceland, educating people. That led to more diversification of the economy, etc. So I think it sort of happened. It's not like a revolution that happened overnight. It was happening over some decades, gradually. I think it's also a healthier way, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I think that we've seen. I think it varies. I think there's places like Singapore, which I think had a very rapid transformation, but also you could argue that there was kind of brick by brick. But what you're describing is kind of this general compounding over a long period of time, and now you guys are where you are today. How did you personally become interested in the FDI program for Iceland in general?
I was actually working for the Trade Union Council of Iceland as an editor. I come from humanities background. There I was working quite a lot with the economists. So where they were preparing general wage agreements, etc. Everyone was looking at productivity, how the economy was doing, how it could grow, etc. So I was involved in assisting them with publications and publishing all these research and outcomes. So that was really interesting. I went from there to the regional development agencies of the city of Reykjavik, where then there was like the beginning of the biotech industry in Iceland was then sort of starting at this time. So it was an exciting time to see what was happening there. So regional development and economic development become like a true interest. From there, I went to the Trade Council of Iceland, which later turned into Business Iceland. In the meantime, actually, I was responsible for publications of the research department of one of the Icelandic banks. That was an interesting period. I actually managed to experience the financial crisis live from within the banking system. It was a steep learning curve to see what was happening. And then afterwards, I was asked to become the political advisor to the Minister of Industries and Innovation. It was a fairly small industry, but at that time, it was all about trying to figure out how to get things moving, how to get something started to rebuild again. But so that's in my trajectory.
It's very cool. Very cool. So yeah, could you bring me back to 2007, 2008? Because and this is my like, very basic understanding. I basically know nothing about this, but Iceland went overboard, a little bit. The Icelandic banks got a little too excited, invested in too many things, and were over levered. And so when the collapse happened, it impacted Iceland in a major way. But then you guys recovered pretty quickly, from my understanding as well. So how did you go from kind of that over levered position to recovering very, very swiftly?
Actually, because the Icelandic banks had become like an international banks based out of this tiny island nation. Big players in many markets in Europe. So they were simply far too big to be rescued by the government. So when things started to squeeze for real, the government realized there is no way we are going to try to save this. So the banks, the big Icelandic banks were basically allowed to go bankrupt. So we brought in the IMF, got some, there was an emergency legislation put in place where we divided the banks into the big international banks to save the sort of domestic part of their operations. And that's where we started again. Now we have a fairly healthy financial system. We had to put temporary currency restrictions in place, which was a bit painful because, like I mentioned earlier, being an open economy is so important. But that was inevitable at the time. But we managed to recover fairly quickly. Obviously, it was painful while it was happening. There was both companies and individuals that were having hard times, but that was happening in other countries as well. But in the meantime, it allowed for a kind of like a fresh start in a way, instead of actually having the burden of having on the state of having tried to rescue an overgrown banking system.
It's hard to argue, with the results of what happened, because Iceland is in such a great position today. So maybe the process that you guys went through actually was the ideal one. Who knows?
Sometimes people are joking that Iceland was used for a while as a poster child by the IMF.
Well, it worked out. So
how it worked out, yeah.
So can you describe the relationship between Invest in Iceland and Business Iceland? Are these two different entities, or are these the same entity?
It's the same entity. Business Iceland is like the umbrella organization that has these three basic roles: attracting tourists to Iceland, attracting and facilitating foreign direct investment, and then we assist Icelandic companies in entering new markets. So it's trade, invest, and tourism rolled into one. And we have a trade and invest part, and Invest in Iceland is under that, and I'm head of Invest in Iceland. So I work quite a lot with like most of the sectors We have head of sectors here. It's like a key account managing systems we have working with the various industries and sectors in Iceland. And I'm like a liaison between them and work with them and assist them when it comes to FDI questions.
Very cool. Okay, so to set the stage in terms of these various sectors, and I'm spitballing here, so you're gonna have to work with me. But I would say, tourism is one of them. Fisheries is one. Energy intensive industries like aluminum smelters, data centers, tech, biotech, and professional services like legal and consulting, et cetera. Like, are these kind of the 5 core pillars, or is there one that I'm missing?
The 5 core pillars we're working with is energy and green solutions, obviously, tech and innovation, tourism, creative industries, and then food and fisheries or natural products. So these are the sectors we have identified. We are actually working under a fairly recent export policy for Iceland that was formulated doing workshops all over the country with some hundreds of participants from the industries and from the public sector as well. There is a marketing council that's actually finalizes the export policy, and the export policy that's now our guiding lights. And in the export policy, we have identified these 5 sectors. And the absolute guiding light we have is that Iceland becomes known as a leading country in sustainability. So sustainability was really pushed to the top of the agenda.
When you say creative industries, how do you define that?
There are various industries. Those are like the performing arts, film in Iceland, etc. So there is quite a lot happening there. Actually, it's not a big sector for foreign direct investments, perhaps with the exception of the filming industry, because we've been quite successful in attracting fairly large international productions to Iceland. So Iceland has featured in many films in recent years. But the sectors for creative industries or creative arts, they all work together with us in actually promoting literature, music, design, etc. Into other markets.
Wasn't some of Game of Thrones filmed in Iceland, or is that?
Yes, we are the land of the wild things. We are not we're not of the wall.
Yeah. Hey, it's something. It's something. It's already cool. All right. So, how are the FDI programs for Iceland decided? Is there a committee in government that says, "Hey guys, we want to bring more data centers, and we want to be, we want to have sustainability be at the forefront," or or is it coming from the prime minister? Like, who is deciding the actual programs and incentives for FDI?
In recent years, it's actually the marketing council on this process of renewing the export policy. So that's where we draw our guidance from. Earlier on, it was actually very much, we had like a board with representatives of some ministers and industry groups that was actually looking at priorities, etc. We very much based our approach then on benchmarking. We were really doing digging into some research, what's here in Iceland that can be like a specific value proposition. And then we hired usually international consultants to do some benchmarking studies, so we have some material to put on the table. That's, for example, how we figured out that Iceland was a place for data centers, because you got renewable energy, lots of cold water and then enough of wind for cooling. We finally managed to find something really valuable about the wind and our climate, which meant that it's possible to operate data centers in Iceland based purely on natural cooling, just ambient cooling.
Yeah, data centers need lots of.
Yeah, they need lots of cooling, and it's always the goal to focus the energy utilization purely on the processing themselves, trying to limit the use of energy you need for other purposes. So we had some really good figures out of that. We were also looking at, because of the geothermal energy and the greenhouses in Iceland, people were looking at various horticultural projects. It turned out that logistics was problematic for many of those, because when you're exporting vegetables, you're basically transferring water in some form. So we focused on some like more valuable products, smaller quantity where logistics wouldn't be a big factor. And we looked into things like the nutraceutical industry, some bioeffective materials, some extracts from plants. And then we looked at microalgae production. And it turned out we had a really compelling case for microalgae production in Iceland that we went abroad and presented, and that industry has been taking off here. Some really exciting companies in that field. And it's part of this future foods idea that's now taking hold, trying to produce vital proteins for humans using only a fraction of the water, land, and energy that traditional agriculture, for example, needs.
Very cool. So these FDI programs or these incentives, you guys are basically analyzing what is Iceland uniquely positioned to do the best, and then leaning into that, but also balancing out the needs of the citizens. And because of course, like you guys could just say, okay, we're going to build 100 aluminum smelters, right? But that would be pretty terrible for the citizens. So it's just this balance between how can we grow Iceland's economy in the way that we want to do it the best.
Yes. And also because we are a small nation, you can't compete in very labor-intensive industries. Obviously, we wouldn't try to do that, but we have a fairly well-educated and trained workforce. So that's why we're looking towards more knowledge-based industries, etc. That would be like our strength. So there are many new sort of ideas that are coming up as well that can be really, really exciting. Cell-grown meat is something that's happening here. I mentioned earlier, producing valuable medical products from cod skin. So we see new things happening all the time.
If you had to rank the top 3 priorities for foreign direct investment, like which 3 sectors or which 3 areas are you guys targeting the hardest, whether it be like data centers or?
I think it would be the knowledge-based industries like biotech, pharmaceuticals, the nutraceuticals industries, like microalgae production, etc. When we are looking at data centers, obviously, that's fairly important. We are not maybe envisioning to become like a major data center hub, but we have a fairly good value proposition for high performance computing, where you need sort of really heavy load on the computers and quite a lot of cooling. We are really, really well connected. And then also, unfortunately, having the ability to run critical applications and store data locally is becoming a security issue. We see what's been happening with some of the submarine fabricables, for example, in the Baltics. So it's a worrying trend. And I think most nations are now looking at having the capacity within the borders actually to be almost semi-independent in case of some catastrophes in this field. So that's becomes because data centers are part of a critical infrastructure. I mean, we're having this conversation based on this technology. So there are very few things that people do today that don't involve processing in a data center somewhere in the world.
In terms of the investors you guys are targeting in order to come and invest in Iceland, what types of funds or entities are these people? Are they primarily corporations or sovereigns or PE funds?
It depends based on sectors. When you're looking, for example, at the data center industry or something like the microalgae production or some of the energy to food, you're looking for companies that actually come and they invest and operate. So these are operational companies. When it comes to supporting the growth of the knowledge-based industries and the tech sector in general, we are very much looking at creating awareness and interest from, for example, funds and LPs, limited partner funds, to try to get them involved in the Icelandic VC scene. And we have also been, by branding and assisting Icelandic companies to create awareness, and they've been doing really well in actually acquiring financing from abroad. And these are very much funds. When it comes to, for example, tourism, hospitality, that's very much real estate based. That can be funds or developers. Because operators in that field rarely ever own any assets anymore. That's part of the past.
And how are you guys announcing these different, for example, if you want to create some incentives for data centers or something like that, do you guys just make an announcement as Business Iceland, hey guys, we are open for business for data centers, come talk to us, and people will flood in? Or how are you identifying these different investors to come to Iceland to do the business?
When it comes to data centers, they are very, very energy dependent, obviously. So we usually team up with the energy companies. And we use our commercial attaches at the embassies, etc., to identify players out there, do some industry research, and then quite often it's direct outreach. One of the things that's been changing in recent years is that both in Iceland and many countries is that FDI promotion is not just about going around shouting how great this country is. And then someone shows interest and you point to a field and say, I'm sure the municipality would be willing to let you build there. You just have to go through the zoning first. Now it's more about trying to identify really competitive locations, trying to figure out all the stakeholders around the utilities, etc., and then try to have the package as complete as possible when you reach out. So you can say, for a data center, this is the availability of installed power in megawatts from day one. This is the planning situation. These are the main utilities. Here are the connections. Here are the redundant connections, etc. So you just put that on the table. And that's what we've been working towards with the regional development companies and the energy companies, for example. The same goes to there is a lot of interest in increasing circularity or circular solutions by encouraging either eco-industrial parks or some circular solution areas where there's some waste from some production that could be value for someone else. And then it's about identifying what's there. How can we make this happen? And then try to present that as precisely as possible.
That makes a lot of sense. Just making it that much easier for investors to make the decision. You package it very nicely, you figure everything out, here are the details, boom. That makes a ton of sense. So how has the FDI strategy evolved over the last few decades? Because from my basic understanding, you guys had many incentives for just kind of everything, or it was broad incentives, we'll call it. And then now you guys are really targeting specific sectors.
Yeah, it was like a general framework legislation for incentives in place for a while. The government decided some years ago to simply let that expire and instead increase support for research and development and introduce some targeted incentives for green investments, meaning that if you are building a production or replacing machinery, vehicles, vessels, whatever, if you choose green options that fulfill certain criteria, then you were eligible for this incentive. And also assisting Icelandic companies to attract foreign specialists to come to Iceland. There were some personal tax incentives introduced for those as well. So it's been very much towards sustainability, knowledge-based industries, etc., and away from the general regional incentives that were in place. We are still, because we are part of the European Economic Area, we are under the EU state aid rules. So there are certain regional incentives that are allowed, but they would have to be, for like a large project, they would have to be negotiated directly with the government and the municipalities.
Yeah, so you guys are part of the EEA, which is the European Economic Area. It sounds like you guys have a lot of the benefits of the EU without a lot of the baggage. Is that accurate, or?
That's how many people in Iceland view it, actually, because being the agreement on the European Economic Area actually means that the EFTA countries, Iceland, Norway, and Liechtenstein, become part of the inner market. almost without exceptions. We have some agriculture and fisheries is not included in the Icelandic agreement, but it means basically that when you establish in Iceland, you have established in Europe, and you have access to the common European market, free flow of good capital, services, and labor. And for us, it's very important because for some investors, it might be a little bit scary to enter a country with such a small population. But when you look at the skill set that you needed, then you would have to look like European-wide, because people can move here without special permits to work from all over the European common market. And it's an important point for us.
So we keep talking about sustainability, and your renewable energy that Iceland has is incredible. There's a stat that I want to read this quote. I pulled this from some publication. Iceland boasts one of the highest per capita electricity production rates globally, with approximately 55,000 kilowatt hours per person per year, significantly surpassing the EU average of less than 6,000 kilowatt hours. So I mean that's outrageous. 55,000 versus less than 6,000. So I guess what was the decision-making process around not leaning fully into, hey, let's just build 100 aluminum smelters. Let's create this more sustainable environment. Just because I feel like if you did, the island would, Iceland would look very different. The country would look very different, but potentially a lot wealthier. But also then the livability of Iceland might decrease. So I guess how was that decision made?
It's actually, the thing is that when the energy intensive industry started in Iceland, we had like a stranded power situation. Like I mentioned, this island is larger than Ireland. Over half of it is 500 meters or more above sea level. We have these big glaciers, so we have these powerful glacial rivers. So the production capacity was actually enormous when this development started. Because it happened fairly rapidly, that means that we now, for example, got energy transmission system in Iceland that's almost state of the art. It's quite powerful, and you imagine with this production, it's way more than the population itself would usually use. But the thing is, you start first with the most economically and least environmentally controversial options. And as you increase the production, they might become less economical or more controversial from a nature preservation standpoint. So at some time, there was a decision made. We needed to have like a framework legislation in place. It's like a master plan for for where to utilize and where to protect. And this is legislation that means there is a review process going on almost constantly, where you're weighing various options, the impact of society, impact of economy, environment, what other use could this area be put to, etc. Which means that even though we have quite a lot of capacity yet, it's not limitless. So it became obvious that we wanted to diversify as well, because it's also a risk management for the energy companies who don't want all your eggs in one basket. So they actually went out with us, for example, to get data centers to Iceland, because they are smaller in scale, or used to be smaller in scale than aluminium smelters. That's changing now. And also because they have a gradual growth. They're not just built up to nearly full size and then turned on. And as we were increasing our electricity production by geothermal, that means because geothermal electricity production usually builds up gradually, that's a good fit for these smaller and more agile industries. So I don't believe we'll see any gigantic energy intensive industrial processes in Iceland fairly soon, because it's a shift in focus. And then we got this export policy focusing on knowledge-based industries and more gradual growth. So that's where we're at, increasing the value from what we have actually.
Yeah, and I would imagine that I could be totally wrong here, but I would imagine that the energy assets within Iceland, because it's primarily renewable, right? Maybe all renewable, um, are way more appealing to corporations or companies that want to set up because maybe they get some sort of credit for using renewable energy, or is that the case, or not really?
Um, you'd have to buy like certification of origin of the energy from the energy companies. That way you can be certified that you are using green energy. The only electricity you can get off the grid in Iceland is either hydro or geothermal. So that's about 70% geothermal, 30%. No, 70% hydro, 30% geothermal. And we managed to solve over 90% of all space heating using geothermal. The remaining is with electricity that comes from renewable sources, which means that the 15% of primary energy use in Iceland left is actually transport. So that's what we are working on. Personal cars, that's the market is basically solving that with EVs. And the state has stepped in, and the municipalities as well have stepped in, supporting and encouraging development of infrastructure for EVs. So it's fairly good. You can travel around Iceland in an EV. I met a guy the other day who actually has a large 4-wheel drive truck that's EV, and he goes into the highland. I didn't realize that could be done, but obviously that's something that's possible now. So that's being sold. Now we are looking at, heavy duty long haul trucking, and then it's the maritime industries and aviation finally. There are some projects that are being developed in Iceland looking at producing, for example, sustainable aviation fuel or alternative to fossil fuels, producing hydrogen by renewable resources and then adding either CO2 or nitrate to produce green ammonia or methanol.
You've spoken about this kind of concept of the circular economy, and from some research I was doing, you guys are building a lot of kind of circular economy zones or these eco-industrial parks. There's there's something called the resource park. There are these, I'm not going to be able to pronounce this, but the Alfasens Eco-Industrial Park in Reykjavik. There's the Gundatargani Eco-Industrial Park in West Iceland. Am I saying that remotely correct or not really?
You're close. These are actually the types that are being developed right now are basically two types. It's the resource park in Reykjanes, which is based on geothermal and cascading usage of geothermal. There are quite a lot of different companies there. And then there is the geothermal park at Hellisheiði by On Power, where we have, for example, microalgae production, and there's growing interest there. And then we have industrial parks that are based on existing energy-intensive processes, for example, ferrosilicon or aluminium, where they're looking at harnessing waste heat, capturing CO2 to use for other processes, etc. Those are, for example, Bakki near Húsavík in the north, and the Grundartangi project that you mentioned. So there is quite a lot going on in this field. But for the geothermal, the focus has very much been on cascading uses. We've been less successful with actually pinpointing the circularity, but cascading uses is very important, meaning that you're using, for example, in the Reykjanes Resource Park, they are looking at using the heat from the geothermal power plant at specific heat for some industrial processes, then at a less heat for some aquaculture, and then at even reduced heat for other types of aquaculture, etc. So it's sort of so you're using the value stream as much as you can.
And did the thought process around this circular economy approach, is that just because you guys are an island nation and just being as efficient as possible, or what was kind of the thought process around that? Because there's lots of countries out there that don't follow this type of approach to industry.
Yeah, I think It was actually a really interesting pioneer that was working at HS Orca called Albert Albertsson. He was like the grand old man of the thought process of circularity. I mean, obviously it comes very much at the forefront following the Brundtland report on sustainability, where actually the concept of sustainability was really developed. And his vision, because he was involved in the process of designing and building this geothermal power plant. And he had this vision, and actually he claimed that this was wisdom that he had gleaned from Native Americans. So about the how you treat the earth and what you try to give back, etc. So he was like the pioneer and the champion behind the resource park on Reykjanes. It was really like maybe one of the first of this kind. But then when you look at generally trying to increase the value from what you're getting, I mean, we are using natural resources, and you can't just do more and more. You need to do more with what you're actually getting. It's similar in the fishing industries. We installed a quota system, which meant a total allowed catch system, actually trying to ensure there's sustainable harvesting of fish from the fishing stocks. And that means that when you want to grow the fishing industry, Iceland is not done by increase in quantity, but in quality and value. And we've been fairly successful actually in getting better prices for what we produce and using more of the fish, all the parts. And like I mentioned, there's been innovative companies that are actually doing an incredible job in this, creating truly valuable products from something that used to be thrown away. So it's just like I think it's a way of thinking to respond to like climate change, the need for actually being responsible with what you have.
Makes sense. All right. So tourism is a massive part of your economy. Some quick stats here. So in 2022, you had 1.7 million visitors. 2023, 2.2 million visitors. 2024, 2.3 million visitors. This is all with a native population of under 400,000. So, I mean, that's a crazy amount of visitors. How are you guys viewing tourism? And do you guys have, or do you personally have any concerns about, just like maybe in the future, there's 10 million tourists visiting Iceland every year?
No, the focus hasn't been on increasing the number per se. Obviously, there is a limit to how many tourists a nation of this size can actually host responsibly. So the focus for my colleagues who work on attracting visitors to Iceland has been very much on better distribution, both in space and time, getting people to visit Iceland year-round to reduce seasonality, which is really, really important for investments in this sector to make sense, and also to get them to travel more widely. I mean, in a country of 103,000 square kilometers, where you have maybe at top days during summer, 70, 80,000 visitors at the peak per day, over-tourism shouldn't be a problem when you think about it in these terms. I mean, just cities like Copenhagen or Dublin are having much more people within a less space. So, but because Iceland we are one of the Nordic countries, we are fairly expensive. We will never become a budget destination. So I don't think we'll ever become a mass tourist destination. So the focus in recent years has been on quality and sustainable development of tourism. So people actually leave here feeling they got their money's worth, even if it was a bit expensive to visit. And also it's important to get investment into this field, because then usually you are developing like new destinations. There are very few, for example, hotels today that are just created as a place to sleep. I mean, most developers are looking at, we are developing here a destination. We want people to come here and have some quality time. They can stay for a while. There are some adventures or experiences to be had around in the vicinity, etc. So you're trying to develop a bond with the local community, work with the local community, service providers there, etc. So that's what we're looking to develop. And then we've also seen development into just new destinations in and for themselves. Like Sky Lagoon is a new competitor to the natural Blue Lagoon. We have seen development like Fly Over Iceland, which is just like an indoor experience. So investments into experiences is also very welcome, because that helps also with the rainy days options, and it helps to distribute people. So you don't get too many buses per day at the natural wonders like Gullfoss and Geysir at the geothermal areas. So distribution in space and time, that's the key.
Yeah, and also I think a big trend working in your favor is the kind of the rise of the health and wellness trend within tourism. And Iceland, as we mentioned before, is some of the strongest, healthiest people in the world. So it's obviously a great spot. So very cool. All right, so you guys are also working on a couple very large infrastructure projects. I think that I'm going to butcher this name. It's called the Keflavik Airport Area Project. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, Keflavik is the international airport in Iceland. And the K64 is actually the name of the project. K for Keflavik and 64 for the latitude. It's actually about coherent development of 55 square kilometers of land on and around the airport. So this airport is like a major hub, a mid-Atlantic hub in aviation and logistics, and is in the enviable situation to have plenty of land around, because so many international airports are actually really squeezed in and have problems and developing. So, and because there are 2 or 3 municipalities that have land there, the state owns the land, etc. The worry was that it would be developed very haphazardly. There would be a competition to get this going up in that municipality rather than this one, etc. So there was as a development company called Kateco, Keflavik Airport Development Company, that was put in charge of this. You have the Icelandic aviation authorities, the state, the municipalities, all the stakeholders involved, and they had an international competition for developing the area as a whole, because this is basically the gateway to Iceland. This is our international airport. Although now we have international flights coming into Akureyri in the north, but the vast majority is coming in there. So we have to combine like a presentable gateway to Iceland with some services, hospitality, logistics, the industries in the area, and to use the strength. And there is a deep sea harbor actually nearby. So this development includes everything from services, hospitality, to an innovative area. There are data centers there are microalgae production. There's an eco-business park. They're looking at an eco-industrial park between the airport and the deep sea harbor. And then part of it is also residential. This is actually, there was an international consortium that won this competition, and it's a really exciting master plan we have. And we are hoping to attract investors and companies into this area.
And do you foresee that this industrial park or airport project becoming, one of the top industrial hubs for air freight, or what is kind of the objective, to be number 5 in Europe, or I say, is there any metric like that, or just in general bring more business?
In general, it's bring more business. Within this whole project, there is another one called KEF Plus, which is the aviation authorities, because they are responsible for developing everything within the airport parameters. And they are looking at building up airside, landside operations and logistics. And hopefully there are some big plans for logistics, and also because the Icelandic industries need logistics as well. We have the pharmaceutical industry growing. It's a very delicate logistics. Biosimilars, you have to temperature control them from the producer to the end user. Similar with many of the delicate seafood. So there is a need for quite a lot of quality logistic solutions. And we have been looking at ways to approach, for example, large international logistics operators to present this opportunity.
So you guys have some pretty incredible incentives for R&D. I think it's like something like 35% R&D reimbursement relating to tech and biotech. And then in addition, if a foreign specialist moves to Iceland, it's like 25% off your taxes for a few years, I believe. Is that accurate?
Yeah, for the first 3 years. So it means that basically of your income, only 75% is counted as a tax base. So 25% is tax-free. So that's a fairly good incentives, and that's based if you're applying for a post that's been identified like it's a post that needs to be filled by a specialist, and someone wants to come from abroad to fill it. Then this is the incentive on the table. This is to help Icelandic companies. The R&D incentive, it's up to 35% for small and medium-sized enterprises. And it's actually at 25% for larger, and it's 35% of the actual R&D cost. So your company gets identified as a company involved in R&D businesses, then you just keep account of all your expenses for R&D, and you get 35% reimbursed. It's via the tax system, but if you're a startup or a company that's not yet making profit, you simply get this paid out. Otherwise, it's reducing taxes. And this has been really successful, for example, for the pharmaceutical industry. Also, the gaming industry in Iceland has benefited from this.
Very cool. So how difficult is it for someone to set up a company within Iceland? Because here in the States, if you want to set up an LLC, it takes all of 20 minutes. But in Iceland, is it a easy process, or is it a little more difficult?
For everyone from the European Economic Area or an OECD country, they can own and establish a business in Iceland. And that's done via the Registry of Enterprises. The processing time for getting that through is maybe 10 to 15 days. So it's a fairly easy process, and most can be done online. We usually advise foreign investors looking to Iceland to enlist the assistance of a local counsel or legal consultant, just to make sure everything is set up correctly from the beginning, from tax purposes, etc. It's just a safety issue, basically. And also because articles of associations, for example, of companies need to be presented in Icelandic as well. So that's something you need to look at. But it's a fairly stable process. Iceland, as part of the European Economic Area, I mean, most of the business legislation in Iceland is very familiar to anyone that's done business in Iceland. We've implemented sort of the basic business legislations.
So how do you pitch people or founders to come start a business or bring their business to Iceland? Because obviously you can say we have a great very educated workforce. We have a lot of incentives. Or what is kind of your pitch for people that are wanting to do business within Iceland?
Yeah, it's we are one of the 5 Nordic countries. We have a very strong rule of law. It's a stable, very safe society. Fairly predictable, familiar business environment, educated workforce. You are basing your company in a country with sustainability as its key focus. Your operations will be powered by renewable energy. So those are sort of the key messages. And then we try to figure out the basic sectors, etc., and find out the niches we have, because we can't be everything for everyone. And as a small country, you need to prioritize. We are not out there to capture the major FDI flows in the world. So we are always looking at the niches where you have something special to offer. A very big, important fact for us is also Iceland is a fairly open society, and so it should be easy to move here and become part of this society.
All right, so we covered all the wonderful things about Iceland and kind of the economic climate and whatnot. What are some concerns that you have about Iceland's economic future?
We would worry. We have always worry quite a lot about the economic situation in the world generally, because we are so dependent on exports. And when you're looking at, for example, both tourism, because we are focusing on high-end seafood, etc., these are the kind of things that people might start cutting down when the economy gets worse in our main markets. So that would be our worry. So if the sort of geopolitical situation worsens and there's economic problems or hardships ahead in our main markets, then that affects us fairly directly.
So what is your personal long-term vision for Iceland? Like if you had full control over the FDI incentives and flows and everything, what would you personally want to see Iceland being a leader in when it comes to, industry here?
I would like to see us to be like a world leader in green solutions, for example, assisting countries all over the world to utilizing low V geothermal areas based on Icelandic expertise and knowledge. I'd like us to offer our young people exciting and good jobs based on knowledge in exciting companies. Due to the small domestic market in Iceland, almost all Icelandic companies today, especially tech companies, they're born global. I mean, they're just looking at the world as a playground. It wouldn't make sense to start developing something just for the domestic market. So I think being like a fairly international society, offering young people these opportunities, that would be my vision.
Very cool. All right. So if you, with all the incentives and all the programs you guys have, looking forward 10 years, if everything goes correct, where do you expect Iceland to be, both from a kind of economic standpoint and population standpoint, just from a overall country health standpoint?
If everything goes according to plan, I think we would be in a fairly enviable position. We would hopefully have gone even further in reducing the dependence on fossil fuel. We would have started working on the maritime industry and the transport industry. We would hopefully, we are growing actually quite fast. Most of that now is from people emigrating from abroad. And I would envision we would be attracting more forest specialists and sort of high value minds that would like to come and join us here to experience the society. I envision also that we might have started building sustainable infrastructure. For example, there are large infrastructure projects coming in the capital area, for example, in sustainable public transport. There's a bus rapid transit system under development that we are hoping will sort of ease the traffic issues and also reduce emissions from transport considerably. And there are neighborhoods that are being developed, and actually they're starting to sell the building rights there. For example, from an area called Keldur, it's an absolutely beautiful area. And there's a great vision for what can be done, and I would like to see that kind of environment being developed.
Very cool. Arnar, thank you so much for joining me. This has been amazing. Where can people learn more about Business Iceland and connect with you?
Invest.is. That's our dedicated website for FDI, and then businessiceland.is for the organization as a whole.
Amazing. Thank you, Arnar.
Thank you.